Hi, welcome back to Jonesy Chats Wrestling. Once again, I'm back. I'm back with regular co-host, none other than Mr. Josh Hayes. We're back this week to discuss this past week's Raw, Survivor Series predictions, and just stuff in wrestling generally. How are you this evening, Josh, before we go forward?
I'm great, man. I was about to tell you, you got to get me a name tag now because
Yeah,
I work here.
yeah, no, definitely.
By the way, this is very random, but you know how I mentioned how the wrestling industry, like everything's connected to everything? This shirt that I'm wearing right now, it's a Mets shirt. You remember, you were at Reload, right?
Yeah, I went to Relay,
So
BLW Relay.
Troy Russell, who was on commentary, and one of my best friends, actually, we went to a Mets game about a year ago, and he gave
Yeah.
me this shirt. So,
Oh,
like I said, the wrestling business never leaves you alone. It's
it's a
always
small
with me.
world. No, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, very, very big week in wrestling. So let's get straight into it then. So we're going to start with Raw this week. So let's go into that then. So obviously Raw started up. We didn't have a video package this week, which was kind of a bit unusual. But the show starts up with Drew McIntyre. Drew does like a massive promo where he says how much he basically wants the belt back. Randy Orton then sort of appeared backstage as well, which was quite cool to see. And we then obviously sort of have them dueling words. I really sort of enjoyed this promo. I think it went on a bit long, but I think it was really, really good. What was your thoughts of the promo at this point?
I was about to agree with what you said. Like it did go on just a little too long for me. It went about 15 minutes. And so, I mean, Raw is 3 hours, but still 15 minutes is a lot of time. And the problem is if you do 15 minutes and there's a point to it, like you need that much time to get your point across, that's fine. But for me, the whole segment, like, with Orton and McIntyre, then you have Miz and Morrison come out. It could have been done in 10 minutes. Like, I feel like especially when Miz and Morrison got out there, everything Miz and Morrison were saying was kind of redundant. Like, they got their point across. Like, everyone watching gets it. No matter who wins the title match, the Miz is going to try to cash in. And even if the Fiend gets involved, the Miz can still cash in. And so they got their point across. It could have been done in 5 minutes. I mean, 10 minutes tops, and they went 15.
Yeah, definitely. I think I enjoyed this promo up to the point what happened next. So obviously, as you said, we had the Miz and Morrison come up, obviously in their suits. Obviously, Miz has got the Money in the Bank briefcase again. They plugged basically the Miz and Mrs. show that was on after. And it just kind of felt comedy, but I get the sort of interleukin. Obviously, Miz mentioned Bray Wyatt, which goes back to kind of their feud previously. And it obviously sets up a match later in the show. But I enjoyed the promo. I thought it was a clever way to start the show. It builds up your main event in case anybody hasn't been seeing the recent weeks, which is good. And it was a really good, like, kind of opening segment. Any other thoughts on this opening segment before I move forward?
Um, no, not really. I mean, it was too, it was just, it felt like filler. And I'm pretty sure that's what it was. They knew they had the whole rundown made out, and it's like, we're going to give these guys 15 minutes, so we're going to write some extra lines for the Miz. There's nothing wrong. I mean, I do think kicking the show off, advertising your main event is good. So kicking the show off with McIntyre was crucial. And
Yeah.
and I'm not knocking at all what they did. I'm just knocking how long they took to do it.
I've got a small, probably criticism, only a small minor criticism. I found that there was no rule at the start of Raw. We didn't have what happened on SmackDown. There was no rule that Drew went to SmackDown and challenged Roman or anything like that. There
True.
wasn't. They sort of missed a trick there. I felt that there was none of that follow up. But it's only a small thing. But it was a good promo, and it does kind of what it needs to do ultimately. We then run into our next segment. So Lana was shown warming up backstage. She's obviously in the gorilla position behind the curtain. Lana told Shayna and Nia Jax she's earned a spot on Survivor Series. Lana wants to prove tonight that she belongs on the team. Lana said she's here for the match and here for Team Raw. Shayna said this match is about them and Nia, proving they run the division. Jax told Lana not to dare tag in. What was your thoughts of this kind of promo?
We're going to see a lot more of it on the show with the women's and the men's teams. They're not doing what I wanted them to do, whereas at this point in the game, the teams would be kind of finally cohesive and feeling together. Like they're still having, especially the women's team, fighting each other. And I mean, we're going to get to more of that later on in the women's match where it's weird. I mean, I guess it kind of fits Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler's characters that they very obviously don't really care about this women's tag team match at Survivor Series. They just care about themselves. But in wrestling, when you're booking a character like that or an angle like that, you have to walk a fine line between a character being selfish and a character just being kind of stupid. And it seems almost like Jax and Baszler cross the line to where they're not even thinking rationally at this point. Like not just with Lana, but what we see them do later on with Mandy Rose. why?
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of my opening thoughts of this kind of segment as well. It kind of carries on from the weeks we've had. Lana's almost like a spare part to a certain point. I do get it. She's meant to be the underdog. Everyone's meant to feel sorry for her. Lana and Jax are becoming sort of some of the biggest heels in the women's division. I get that. We then kind of go into sort of the next segment, which is the match. So we had Asuka, Mandy Rose, and Dana Brooke versus Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, and it was Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, and Lana. Obviously, the women's tag team champions here. This match was okay. It wasn't anything special. To be honest, I was surprised it went ahead. Mandy Rose obviously was selling an injury from the previous week's show. So she's out there with black tape, which was a bit unusual, which kind of makes sense. But they did what they needed to do. There was a lot of teasing of sort of Shayna and Asuka, I felt. But once again, Lana is the one that gets sort of beat, if that makes sense. Asuka tapped Lana out. And I thought that was a clever move. I was glad Lana was the one that took sort of the submission here. I didn't want sort of Shayna to be tapped out, so I kind of enjoyed it. What was your thoughts of this match and what happened?
It's a very difficult situation because at that time, all 6 of the people in the match have matches this Sunday at Survivor Series. So how do you have someone win and someone lose, but not have the person who loses look too weak? But it goes back to what I've been saying, that I just not a fan of seeing the team fighting each other. And what I especially didn't like is that it's not just they're trying to win a match. You have Shayna Baszler very clearly trying to injure Mandy Rose, who's her teammate at Survivor Series. And that's where you cross that line from selfish to just dumb. And it just doesn't make sense to me.
I think this all goes back to, Josh, I agree with you. I think this all goes back to the fact there's no real consequence of winning at Survivor Series. As we've said on other podcasts, it's just a match for the sake of it, which is a shame, really. I think if there was a title shot at the end of this match, whoever won got a choice of the women's title, whether it's Raw or SmackDown, I think that would make the wrestlers maybe toe in line. But I get it. I think the problem is you've had, obviously, during the match, there was a constant bickering, as you said. I understand why they did it. They did it, obviously, to try and build up this match, a team that's obviously not getting on and stuff like that. But obviously, post-match, we then had sort of Lana once again kind of go for a table, if that makes sense. So this is obviously the 9th time now. And what were your thoughts of the 9th time? Are you still a fan of this, or do you think it's just kind of the babyface push for Lana could carry on without the table swap?
Well, let's talk. I want to talk about the babyface push for Lana too. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm entertained by it, but I very much expect it, because that spot on that show screams classic Vince McMahon. Because I've said it before, when he notices that there's a pattern, he wants to keep it going for as long as possible. And Vince is entertained by seeing Lana go through the table. I mean, the only thing that can make it more cliche is if every Monday they're putting Lana through the Spanish announce table, which is also something that Vince has always been obsessed with doing. Now, this babyface push for Lana, I do want to talk about that really quick. Because here's the issue I have with it. Lana, as I've mentioned in past podcasts, is not, I mean, to all of her credit for the work she's put in, she's just not the athlete and the fighter that the women that they kind of bring into the company nowadays, like Shayna Baszler, are. And so if you're going to build Lana up to be this top babyface on Raw, how do you pay that off if she's going to have to face people like Asuka or Shayna Baszler? I just don't ever envision her able to have this long competitive match with those women, especially the way that she's so easily just grabbed by someone like Nia Jax and put through a table. A babyface, sure, but I don't think you've mentioned it, but I've heard from some of the news sites that they're actually trying to book Lana as a top babyface.
Okay.
So what is she, like a female Spike Dudley? I mean, I don't really know how you pay that off.
That's the trouble. I think the problem is if you had fans, I'd get that they would cheer when she gets a revenge and a comeuppance eventually. But I think the whole thing, it's a bit, it's a shame really that kind of they're in this team really going into Survivor Series, because really the real feud to me seems to be sort of Lana being outnumbered every single kind of week. That seems to be kind of the way we're kind of going. But I'm just getting a bit bored of the spot. I understand its comedic value, probably is up there with the 24/7 title, but if this is what WWE are thinking is going to lead to Lana getting the massive push and being able to compete with people like Asuka and other people in the division, I just don't see it happening. Do you think there's any way they can kind of turn this around?
I mean, NXT, we had that guy Leon Ruff beat Johnny Gargano. So, yeah. I mean, someone who's been booked as very weak can suddenly get a win, but it's just a matter of Leon Ruff is not the top babyface of NXT. And everything that I've seen is speculation that Lana, they want her to be the hero of the women's division, like the top babyface. and I don't see how that's attainable at all.
No, definitely. We then moving forward, we had a backstage scene, obviously with Team Raw. We got Sheamus, Riddle, Keith Lee, and Braun Strowman once again bickering. AJ Styles turned up with Jordan once again. Styles tried to give a team talk, basically to try and get them round, saying he's the team captain. Riddle mentioned the nickname, and there was more bickering. Styles basically said all of us hate to lose, so we need to get on. They said they're going to have a warm-up match against Retribution. He tossed Raw shirts at all of them. And then Riddle said he's got a nickname basically for AJ's tall friend. Riddle said the tall friend doesn't even speak. Riddle says that he's got the nickname. AJ says the tall friend doesn't even speak English. The big man said, of course he did. AJ never asked. AJ looked like it was just shot. It was just pure comedy. I really love this segment. I thought it was so funny. What were your thoughts?
I liked the bit with Matt Riddle and AJ and the bodyguard. The part before what we've been talking about, I wish you would do a segment where Team Raw in the backstage part are actually trying to work together and everybody's hyped up and everybody's feeling it. I think it would make it better for later on in the show when what happens in the match happens, to where like they think backstage they think they're going to be able to work together, and then you don't see them fall apart until they're actually in the match. I think that would set a much better precedent. I didn't really like the bickering backstage because it makes it look like already these guys are going to have trouble facing Retribution. I'm getting ahead of myself right here, but I did think that they were going to try to make Team Raw look strong. I thought they were going to demolish Retribution later on in the show, and we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, so I thought it was a fun segment. You're getting everybody on the camera again, which is important. I think the real heel-face dynamics really kind of playing off. I think that's the reason why we're getting so much bickering. But AJ Styles as a leader, I really thoroughly enjoying it. I think he's great. He's a great comedic heel, and I think the fact that nobody's respecting him, I really like that. Great to see Jordan out there again. That's another cameo for him. We actually heard him speak, which was okay. Very, very sort of unusual that he did. I think the name they gave him, I think it was Estes or something like a bit of a comedy name. Weren't really a fan of that. I know it's
like,
almost. Sorry, I thought it was Estes. Almost. Sorry, almost.
I don't. But we don't know how to spell it yet. That's the thing.
No,
I've seen debates online already about how you spell it, but it's almost like he's almost a superstar.
Almost. Yeah, no, definitely. I think he'll have another name change probably by the time Raw happens. But no, definitely, it was a segment that needed to happen. We then went to backstage. Dana Brooke was shown backstage. Obviously, she was getting interviewed by Charlie Caruso. Brooke then complained about what Shayna did to Mandy Rose. We then had Reckoning show up, and Reckoning then took out Dana Brooke. Really, really kind of like this. This is the first time really we've seen Reckoning do anything other than having fits in the ring. And I think this is a great heel tactic. I think this was really, really clever. What were your thoughts on this segment?
So I mostly liked it. I mean, yeah, Reckoning, Mia Yim, whatever you want to call her, has been saying that she wants to, start taking some action on her own on behalf of Retribution. And so it's nice to see her finally, matching up her actions with her words. The only issue I had with it is more of an aesthetic thing. The fact that she was wearing jean shorts was a little odd to me because we haven't seen any member of Retribution. Like, they're usually in all black. And it's just kind of weird that she's still decked up like Reckoning, but suddenly she just looks like this country girl, just like, I don't know, they're like cut off jean shorts. It was odd. Like, it doesn't fit we haven't seen any of the other guys in denim or anything. Like, they're in all black. They're in all black tights and stuff like that. And she's been dressed that way too. So I don't know, like, I'm not sure what the decision was on that, but for me, aesthetics like that can sometimes be weird. Actually, for other people too, because I saw a few weeks ago, people were making a big deal about it, about how Randy Orton fought like the first 10 minutes of the Hell in a Cell match in black pants because he came out disguised as a crew member, and it was just weird seeing him wrestle like that. So other people do pick up on that too.
Definitely. I think it's just great really to see on camera. I agree with the points though. I think aesthetics, yeah, they should be a bit more on the ball with that, but it's a small criticism, and I think it did what it needed to do really. It gets her a spot, it makes her aggression. I just hope that there's sort of a payoff really down the line. I think this should sort of lead somewhere, but clearly if they are planning on a push now for Reckoning, that was the right way to start. So no, I'm a massive fan of the segment, and it was it was more refreshing to see her do something rather than be a spare part, which is what she's been so far since Retribution kind of started, if that makes sense.
Yes, and we need to see more of that out of all the members of Retribution if they're going to push them.
Definitely.
We need to see Slapjack going into business for himself. I think the idea would be to have T-Bar and Mace as a tag team. They have a finisher together already. It's actually the same finisher that, what was the tag team with Rowan and Harper? What were they called?
Oh, the Bludgeon Brothers.
Yeah, they've given Mason T-Bar that same like crucifix powerbomb move or whatever. So hopefully we're going to see them in the tag team division at some point.
Let's hope so. Definitely. We then go on to the next segment. So this is the Firefly Funhouse. Bray and Alexa Bliss are both on the set of the show. Wyatt made a promo about the Miz, and Bliss said it's Wyatt versus Miz because Bray wants to teach him some manners. Wyatt noted Miz doesn't want to see his bad sides. This led to images of the Fiend being shown. They then showed sort of Wyatt doing some agility tests where he knocked down Huskus and Mercy. Wyatt also did some spelling. The word jackass was spelt, and it basically spelled Miz, which I thought was quite funny. Ramblin' Rabbit was on the dashboard. Once again, Ramblin' Rabbit basically gets killed. And then we basically have them just basically laughing and doing other stuff. It was a kind of a very kind of basic vignette in terms of the Funhouse. What were your thoughts of this, and what did you take from it?
I thought it was fantastic. Yeah, it was classic Bray Wyatt, classic Firefly Funhouse. I love the bit where, you know, he's going to have a match, and we don't see him wrestle much, especially on Raw. So it's like, oh, he's got to train for this impromptu match, and his training is absolutely ridiculous, as everything they do on the Firefly Funhouse is. Alexa Bliss helping him prepare for it was great. And I had an epiphany, actually, when I was watching Raw last night. Did you ever watch South Park?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Rambling Rabbit is the Kenny of the Firefly Funhouse, to where he always dies.
Yeah, he always dies, but then he's always back every single week. So it would fit Kenny, I guess.
Just like Kenny, just like Kenny on South Park.
I wonder whether we're ever going to get that kind of cleared up to what the purpose of Rambling Rabbit is, but maybe one day down the line. But no, definitely.
I think it's just one of those things to where in the Firefly Funhouse, it's its own world. You know, like we see a lot of supernatural things happen. So in the Firefly Funhouse, the people, the characters, it's the same way you can't kill the Fiend. They just kind of reincarnate as themselves once the segment's over. Like it's just this magical make-believe world where life and death does not even exist.
Well said. I think sort of going forward now, we then had the Hurt Business come out, and obviously you had MVP do a promo. MVP said this Sunday at Survivor Series, it's the best versus the best, and there's going to be nobody better than the Hurt Business. MVP also put over Bobby Lashley and said he's going to basically squeeze the life out of Sami Zayn. Benjamin and Cedric said that they're going to take the New Day's title, and they're also going to prove to the Street Profits that they are the best. And also what was happening is there was good words sort of said about bigging up the Hurt Business, really basically putting that business over. And I really like the fact that the Smackdown was mentioned. What was your kind of thoughts of this promo up to the point when the New Day enter?
My very first thought, they looked so badass in that entrance when the music hit and they walked out. It's a great stable. And I like, going back to aesthetics, I like the fact that they're dressed in these really nice suits and stuff, except for the two guys who had a match. It looks great. They're a great team. Each guy has his own dynamic. And the promo was good. I mean, MVP is a great talker. He always has been. He's a great mouthpiece for three guys like Benjamin, Alexander, and Lashley. It was good.
Definitely. We then had obviously the New Day enter, Kofi and Xavier. Kofi said what the Hurt Business was saying wasn't true. The only truth is that the best at Survivor Series were with the New Day versus Street Profits. Kofi said that they sound like a bunch of jokes. MVP said something, so Kofi told him to wait until they get to the Punchline Business. And Kofi said that they're more like the Jerk Business. Kofi said people will be laughing. Woods noted that they won't let the Hurt Business represent Raw, and it's going to be New Day that represents Raw because New Day rocks. I really like the Jerk Business line. I thought it was clever. What were your thoughts on the New Day's part of the promo?
Yeah, it was funny. I mean, each team playing up their dynamic, their vibe, their character, you know, it was good. And it set up the tag team title match very well.
Interesting moment. So that was kind of the first hour of Raw, and we'd only had kind of one match. So what do you make of that?
It was a lot of promos and a lot of backstage stuff. Yeah, I definitely noticed that.
Perfect. Okay. We then go into the Raw Tag Team Championship. So this was the New Day versus the Hurt Business. Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander. New Day defending the belt. This was an absolutely fantastic match. Clearly they'd had a match recently where it was just excellent. And this match for me really, really delivered. I got really, really invested in it. You never know who's going to win. A couple of very good moments in there. There was a nice Trouble in Paradise that Kofi executed on Benjamin on the apron. We had a nice double foot stomp known as Daybreak, which was quite clever. But then what we got ultimately was we got the New Day retaining, which was a big shock to me. I was surprised to see that. What were your thoughts on the match and what happened?
You know, I had concerns about this match because I, as a fan, really wanted to see New Day versus Street Profits. And there was this fear in the back of my mind that they wanted to do a babyface heel match in Survivor Series and we're going to give the titles to the Hurt Business. And so, yeah, I was very happy to see the win. As I said last week, I have no problem giving the Hurt Business the tag titles. I just really wanted to see that specific match this Sunday. Yeah, the match was very good. I mean, every guy in there was great. One guy who I want to give special recognition to, though, is Xavier Woods, because I feel like, I mean, when you're in the ring with guys like Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin, who, I mean, Cedric Alexander, I've known him actually since he was wrestling in Atlanta, and he's always been just athletically such a versatile performer. He can do pretty much everything. Shelton Benjamin, for his age especially, I mean, he's been there almost as long as Randy Orton and can still go in the ring. Kofi, we know he's a main event performer, but Xavier Woods, in the New Day, I feel like he was the one who was kind of always viewed as the third guy. But Xavier Woods is very good. I mean, he's on the same level of performer that Kofi and Big E are. And I like when he gets matches where he has the opportunity to showcase that. I might be a little biased because he's from Atlanta too. But yeah, I mean, he's good. And it's easy to overlook how good he actually is until you see stuff like that match.
Definitely interested to hear your thoughts on Xavier Woods. What I thought was great about this match is, as you said, they all got a really good amount of time because of the length of the show. I think it really did a good job. And for me, I think this is going to be a rematch at TLC. I really could see this going to TLC. And I can actually see the Hurt Business winning next time round, which I think would be a fan of. Would you be a fan of seeing these face again at TLC?
Yeah, I think it's good because I'm getting, as a fan, exactly what I want. I'm getting the dream match this Sunday, but we keep the feud between the Hurt Business and the New Day alive. And, you know, if that winds up being Benjamin and Alexander having the titles, that's great. Yeah, I think these guys could have a very good ladder match. They could have a good tables match. You know, I think that's going to be something they do at TLC.
Definitely, I could agree. I'd love to see that. I think that would really work. Hopefully it happens. We then go to another continuity state segment. I thought this was really clever. This was Sheamus backstage. He called for Drew to come up and speak to him. Sheamus said him and Drew have known each other for a long time. They're very close. And obviously Sheamus knew Drew's mum, who was like a second mum to him. Sheamus said he had something for Drew. It was basically an old crate/chest, had some of Drew's wrestling gear. And then obviously Sheamus went up to him and then gave Drew a sword. Drew looked delighted. It was almost like he was being knighted or something like that. What did you think of this segment and the continuity from last week?
I'll tell you something pretty cool about it. But one thing that I wanted to mention that's very, very random. The cover, like this burlap cover they had over the crate, did you notice that I'm pretty sure it's the exact same cover they had for Eric Rowan's cage? Like it was identical. It either was the exact same one or was one just like it. But so what was cool about this segment is I know there's speculation that this is going to set up a feud with Sheamus and McIntyre, and Sheamus is ultimately going to turn on him and stuff like that. But in the business, there are these moments to where even though you know it's just to set up a turn, the good moment when it happens is legit. And so you remember WrestleMania 19 when Jericho and Shawn Michaels had their match, and Jericho hugged him after the match, and then he turns heel again and low blows him or whatever. Yeah. But Jericho said, you know, that part where he gives him the hug, that was a shoot. Like, that was legit. And it was great to have that moment and that photo of him hugging Michaels before he went back into his character. The same way, even if this does wind up with Sheamus turning on McIntyre, those two guys being real-life friends for a very, very long time, getting to have that moment where Sheamus is the one that gives McIntyre his extra motivation, I know that was legit. And the stuff that he was saying about McIntyre's family and everything, those two guys as people definitely enjoyed having that moment and having it recorded.
Definitely. I think it's a very interesting dynamic. The fact you've got the baby face and the heel there, it's always a difficult thing to kind of portray on television, I think, a little bit. But I really enjoyed the segment. A couple of things I'd maybe like to see of it. Do you believe kind of the rumours going around that potentially when they do have a match that the sword and all that lot's going to be cursed or something like that? Do you think that could happen on WTV now?
I haven't heard about that, but given some of the things we've seen in 2020 wrestling especially, I would not be surprised.
Definitely. No, definitely. Yeah, so moving on then. So we then had the match between Team Raw and obviously Retribution. So Team Raw obviously is Braun Strowman, Sheamus, Riddle and Keith Lee. And then we then had Retribution, Mustafa Ali, T-Bar, Mason, Slapjack. So this obviously was the big tag match to try and build up Team Raw. But yeah, it was okay. Everybody kind of got their offense in, but by some miracle, we got Ali get the win. Ali managed to roll up Riddle with just a roll up of death, basically. And it got the shock win. A couple of my thoughts before I go to you, Josh. I was shocked to see Retribution win. This is a massive win for them. I was a bit disappointed that you had Riddle take the pinfall here. Clearly last week he was on a push, it seemed. He seemed to be getting his momentum back. But I get it. Out of the other people that are sort of in team kind of Raw, I just don't think they wanted to risk Retribution getting the pinfall here, but it was an okay match. It did what it needed to do it, and just involved more of Team Raw bickering, much like the rest of the show, really. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, given what you just said about the finish, I thought about that too. Riddle just was the only viable option because if you think about it, no one's going to roll up Braun Strowman. Pretty much no one Ali's size is going to roll up Keith Lee. Sheamus, if they actually want him in a WWE title angle with Drew McIntyre going forward, doesn't need to be taking the loss. So Matt Riddle, I mean, AJ Styles would have been the only other possibility, and he wasn't in the match. So the match itself, it didn't go that long. But yeah, just like you, I thought this was going to be a match to kind of get over Team Raw as a team and show them working together. And I was just as surprised as you when I saw, because I thought making Team Raw look strong on the go home show for Survivor Series was crucial. I thought they would do that, but at the same time, I did feel bad for Retribution because even though they've been pushing them slightly more in the last few weeks, you would see them jobbing out in this match. And it's actually they're doing what I said they might not be able to do a few weeks ago. They are trying to turn this ship around. Something else that we saw that you pointed out to me, they had this thing where Ali went back to his hacking skills, and we saw Retribution take over the official WWE Twitter handle. And so they are definitely protecting Retribution, which I never thought I would say in November. And so it's a good sign. I mean, I basically could not be completely happy with what they were doing because even if they had given me what I wanted where Team Raw looks strong, that makes Retribution lose. So something had to happen, one way or the other.
A couple of things I'd say, Josh. I think the thing with it, the booking of Retribution compared to last month where all of them got destroyed by The Fiend on his own, basically, and the way that they were losing every week is a massive sort of turnaround. Do you think like a no contest would have been much more sensible, way, rather than give Ali the clean kind of win over Riddle to a certain point?
No, because I think the message they wanted to send is if Team Raw worked together on Sunday like they did on Monday, they will lose. And I think they wanted to show the visual of Team Raw actually losing to show if you guys can't get it together by Sunday, this is what's going to happen to you. And I mean, Ali, it works for Retribution because Ali is with all due respect to Edge, right now, Ali is the ultimate opportunist.
I think they're continuing the recent run of Ali. Ali obviously last week beat Ricochet, and they're clearly giving him a bit of push, which is good. And obviously the mention you mentioned earlier with the Twitter, that was a really nice segment they did as well, which won't be on television, where Retribution did take over the Twitter, which was interesting. But I'm really liking the whole way they've done this. It's great to see sort of somebody come out with some credit, which is Retribution. But interested to see how Team Raw sort of maintain it on sort of Sunday, but we'll talk about it later. Yep. We then went into the next sort of segment. Nikki Cross was shown walking backstage. Sarah Schreiber then asked why she was looking for Alexa Bliss after last week. Cross said friends don't give up on each other. Cross said no matter what, Lexi has to stay away from the Fiend. So they're just kind of promoting what was going to come later. Any thoughts to add?
In that moment, I was hoping that we would see some progression of this story because I think it's the third or fourth week in a row that Nikki Cross has been playing that same act that I'm not going to give up on her. I'm going to turn her around somehow. We need to see some forward progress, but you can't have the same thing every week. And so, spoiler alert, we do get some progress on it.
Yeah, we do. No, definitely. Going sort of full with that, we then had another segment. Jeff Hardy's obviously backstage. He's got a flyer. It's almost like a wanted poster to who ran over Elias. He then catches up with Elias, and Jeff obviously pushed Elias up to the locker room. I thought this feud was done, so I was very disappointed to see these two still bickering with each other. And just total waste of segment. They're filling time here because the 3-hour show. What did you think?
I can't tell where they're going with it because, a couple of weeks ago, I thought the guitar and a pole match was the blow-off match for this feud, and they were going to move Elias and Jeff Hardy into different angles. But this segment, I can't tell if it was done to continue the feud or if they somehow did this segment to actually show that the feud was over, because what we saw is Jeff Hardy adamantly telling Elias, physically threatening him, saying, I'm not the one who hit you with a car. And what we see from Elias doesn't try to fight back. It's almost like because of how aggressive Jeff Hardy is, Elias is starting to believe him, or is at least so intimidated by him that he doesn't want to push it any further. And so I'm not sure what they're going to do with this.
I hope they move on. That's what I really hope. But kind of going forward then. We obviously had the Miz and Morrison come out. Miz did a promo saying that he doesn't have to have a reason to have a match with Bray Wyatt. He was trying to get out of the match. Miz said Drew and Randy will have a match and then they should basically work together with Miz cashing in on the Money in the Bank contract. Wyatt wants to face Orton, and so there's no reply. We then got Alexa Bliss come out in the Funhouse. She was almost in a daze. Nikki Cross then turned up. We then had them basically exchanging words. It then ended up in like sort of Bliss and Cross punching each other, almost having to be pulled apart. We then had Bray turn up. Bray's obviously Funhouse Bray. And then we then had obviously Alexa walk off with Bray. Alexa looked like she's like the happiest person ever, really enjoying kind of what she's doing. What were your thoughts on this?
So, well, there's a few things to address. With Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss, what I was just saying a few minutes ago, we needed this moment to happen because it's been building up, but it's kind of stagnated. So we're finally getting our payoff to where hopefully Nikki Cross has given up on this and now she just wants to beat the hell out of Alexa Bliss. I was actually surprised because Alexa slaps her first and Alexa jumps on her and starts punching her. And I was surprised to see when Nikki rolled it over, she immediately starts punching back on Alexa. It's not something you would do to a friend that you're trying to redeem. So it's like Nikki might be kind of turning around to where she's like, I'm not looking to redeem you anymore. I'm just looking to beat the hell out of you for what you've done to me. And yeah, the other thing we got is a very rare appearance outside the Funhouse in the arena of Red Sweater Bray Wyatt. I think you can count on one hand the amount of matches that guy's had since he started the whole Funhouse gimmick. And the funny part is, I think the first match he had with the Red Sweater was also against The Miz.
Small world. Yeah, unusual. We then go into the match. It's Bray Wyatt with Alexa Bliss versus The Miz and Morrison. This match was okay. It did what it needed to do. Probably the highlight of the match was outside where Bliss and Morrison did a fantastic spot over the barricade.
Oh my God, that was amazing. Alexa Bliss, she was a gymnast, but I didn't know someone who's 5 feet tall could jump like that. And Morrison sold it so well. Like, if you watch it back, to sell it, Morrison pretty much did a moonsault over the barricade. And they've done a couple of spots with that same section of the Thunderdome before. I'm 99% sure they have what's called a crash pad behind that barricade. Because I think we saw one where Montez Ford was shot like 10 feet up in the air and did like a face plant on that same part of the floor. And so, yeah, it's a section of the arena they can use for cool spots like that they would not be able to do, obviously, with the fans there. And, yeah, I mean, that was great. And the match itself, I thought was good, too, because the only downside to it, which we talked about before, The Miz being Mr. Money in the Bank gets less and less threatening. But I think it doesn't hurt The Miz long term, because I think the entire dynamic of The Miz in his whole WWE career is that he wins by flukes and he wins by bending the rules all the time anyway and taking advantage of situations. So it doesn't necessarily make it look like, oh, when he cashes in, he's not going to win, because The Miz's entire career is winning titles and winning matches that he shouldn't be winning.
No, I agree with you. I think they're going to make The Miz a bit like the chicken underdog that basically goes in and basically sneaky heel that gets the win and cashes in when everybody's down and out, which kind of makes sense. It kind of fits his character. I'd agree with that. We then obviously after had the sort of post-match, Bliss was walking across the barricade like she was in a trance. She then jumped up and went hand in hand with Wyatt up the ramp. We then had the Fiend turn up on the screen. This is a massive kind of talking point for me. A couple of Fiends, I'd say. I've got two Fiends here, so I'll start with the Fiend being there. What do you make of the Fiend being almost like a different person almost? It's almost like Bray and Alexa looking up the Fiend. And this is one of the first times I think we've seen the Fiend or Bray Wyatt kind of together, if that makes sense, in like an arena. It's almost two different people. What kind of makes of that? Is this a one-off or is this going to lead somewhere, do you think?
I don't know. They've made some references like that in the past, but it's never been consistent. It's never been consistent in whether the Fiend is a different person to Bray Wyatt, at least. I mean, obviously everybody else knows it's him. Or because in a lot of Firefly segments, though, I think actually Monday night in the Firefly Funhouse, Bray Wyatt mentioned that, like, his bad side or whatever, like it's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It's the same being, but two different sides of them. But yeah, there have been some times like what we got after the match where to Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss, the Fiend is this different person, almost like he's their supreme leader. And I don't really know what their ultimate plan is. And honestly, if I had to put money on it, I don't think they really know, because they've never been consistent in that. Whether it's a different guy. The Bray Wyatt does call him he, but a lot of psychopaths in horror movies and stuff who have an alter ego refer to their other personality as he or she. And so I don't know.
I think definitely if you believe kind of the dirt sheets this week or the news that's kind of broke, they reckon the Fiend is going to be like he's going towards a heel turn eventually. Apparently, in his end game, apparently he's going to be Edge. Apparently, that's kind of what they've said kind of this week. Which I think maybe they're going to have Bray Wyatt. Obviously, he's the good guy, babyface. Alexa Bliss maybe is a babyface as well. The fact they haven't followed up on Alexa with her tongue. Obviously, the other week she had her tongue come out and was metamorphosed. That's kind of been dropped now. Do you think that they've not really done enough? Transforming Alexa Bliss really, other than her being happy all the time at the moment?
They haven't fully developed, like what we were just talking
It's not
about with,
consistent, is it?
Red Sweater Bray Wyatt
Yeah.
versus The Fiend. They haven't fully developed the two different personas of Alexa Bliss yet. I think and I hope they will eventually. But yeah, I mean, I think the way that they're going to be, but I mean, in this feud with Nikki Cross, if they actually do a feud and have matches, Alexa Bliss turning on her friend is clearly the heel. But with Bray Wyatt, they're doing what I said they should do with him. He, in the match we saw, he acts like a heel. He's acting like this really mean guy, but he's fighting The Miz, and anybody who fights The Miz is going to be the babyface. And so if he acts like a heel, but he fights other heels, that's the way you do a babyface. Like, you don't have a babyface to where he's doing all this babyface fire in his matches and come on, that kind of stuff. You don't need any of that. And that's the way you do it.
I think if I was booking it, if they were clever, what I'd like to see them do, I'd like to see them book kind of Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton sort of at TLC. It getting to the point where Bray can't beat Randy, and obviously you then get this whole metamorphosis where the Fiend obviously is almost, it's not somebody else, but it's somebody else that Bray can no longer control what he does. So the Fiend could attack anybody. He's obviously attacked Alexa Bliss before. There's nothing stopping him. Perhaps he can then attack people, which then leads to maybe this metamorphosis of Alexa Bliss. But I'm sure there's going to be a plan. But no, they're doing some great work with this whole Alexa Bliss Bray thing. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Perfect. We then went on to our next segment. We had Adam Pearce basically saying that Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke are both going to be out of Team Raw at Survivor Series. This apparently was due to the early attacks on the show. Adam Pearce then made the announcement, and he said that the replacements are going to be Lacey Evans and Peyton Royce. So Adam Pearce, once again, he's your GM again, without being the official GM, as we said before. What are your thoughts of these replacements and what in the way they've done it?
Well, my understanding is Mandy Rose is legitimately injured.
Yeah,
and so they had to find some replacements. But I actually think they could wind up being better. Because what we had before was Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler being the bullies, and Lana's this girl who's getting picked on. But even Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke, they were sort of like, we need to all get along, but they weren't exactly standing up to Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler that much. Whereas Lacey Evans steps in and makes it very clear to Baszler and Jax that you're not going to push us around, I thought it was good. I've said in the past that I think it's kind of redundant breaking up the Iconics just to put Peyton Royce back into a tag team. But I'm interested in seeing what happens now because unless I don't think they will, but unless the women's team makes an appearance on SmackDown, we're not going to see that full team of Lana, Evans, Royce, and Baszler and Jax together until Survivor Series.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm a fan of this. I'm much more of a fan of Peyton Royce being in the team. I think we called this a couple of weeks ago. We said we'd rather see Peyton Royce and Lacey Evans in this spot. So I'm a big fan of this. I guess it gives sort of Dana Brooke something to do with reckoning now as well when she comes back. And obviously Mandy Rose's been injured last week. It fits. It's just unfortunate Dana Brooke's the one that's going to miss out because of this. But no, it's something different. I think the only problem with this I can see is that they've not really had a time to build this whole chemistry. Obviously the last month they've had this whole thing of Mandy, Dana, and obviously Nia and Shane are not getting on, and that's obviously gone now. I think they've not really had time to demonstrate this storyline they want because of the injury, but I'm sure it'll be a good match anyway. Kind of moving forward now, we then go into another kind of segment, and we've got Angel Garza doing his weekly promo again, going on about the Rose. It's a shame he's not in the ring at the moment. I think this promo, I don't know where it's going. Still don't know where it's going. What's your kind of thoughts of this promo? Are you enjoying it still, or do you want to see him back in the ring soon?
I'm an Angel Garza fan, but sort of some things I've said about some other segments on this show, it is getting a little redundant. It's like the Nikki Cross, Alexa Bliss things. They're kind of having them say the exact same things for weeks on end, whereas we need to see a little progress. We need to see where is Garza going with this. I guess it's a very quiet repackage, like not a total overhaul, but a moderate repackage into Angel Garza is this more womanizer, because it's always been part of his character, but I think they're going to make it the main thing to where he is almost like a Val Venus that you've talked about. But I will say again, I don't know how this ultimately pays off, since WWE doesn't really do intergender wrestling. How can Angel Garza fighting a guy really involve this character who likes to hit on the ladies? You know, it just, like, if it were, if it were an intergender match, that could work. That, like, as we saw that with Santino Marella and Beth Phoenix years ago. They started wrestling each other, and this attraction built up from the matches. I mean, I think I said this before too. In 2020, you have to be careful how you do that, because you don't want to do a match where the guy is sexually harassing, you know, all that stuff. But like, there are ways to do it, but I don't know if they will, because WWE doesn't seem to like intergender wrestling at all.
Definitely. I think it's an okay segment. It reminds me a bit of a segment we were going to have back in '98 where we had Val Venus. If you believe the early sort of WWF magazine and dirt sheets and stuff, the original plan for Val Venus was apparently he was going to try and sort of pursue a relationship with Stephanie McMahon that would ultimately lead to him being kind of fired in the storyline. They obviously never pulled the plug on that. It was one of Russo's ideas that didn't happen. Do you think WWE have got the capability with certain women on the roster for Angel to go after the wrong person? Then maybe this then leads to him sort of having a feud off the back of it, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would do, because I do think, and by the way, I argued with Louis Rossiter and BLW many, many times about this. I think there is a place for intergender wrestling in today's industry, because the issue that you would have had back in the 80s is not an issue anymore. The average man is not 100 pounds bigger than the average woman. I mean, if you had a match between Ronda Rousey and Rey Mysterio, how is there any like size or strength discrepancy? There are women who can fight. I mean, one of our shows with BLW, we had Aisha Raymond in a hardcore match with 3 other guys, and there was nothing unbelievable about what she did. You know, it all made sense, and there's ways to do it. I just don't know if WWE will.
Definitely. We then went into kind of the main event. So obviously quite often throughout the build up to the main event, Tom Phillips was shouting, this is a WrestleMania worthy match. Obviously going into the main event, we knew there was 25 minutes left. We knew this was going to be a long match.
Yeah.
Clearly, obviously, this has been building for a couple of weeks. Very exciting to see a main event this level on Raw, even though we have seen this match quite a few times this year. I was very, very excited about this. Really had a question. We didn't know which way it was going to go. A couple of key things in the match that were clever. We had Adam Pearce come out again saying it's going to be a no contest, a no count out, no disqualifications. So the winner will be pinfall or submission. A lot of near falls. We had Orton obviously going for a Claymore kick. We had the announce table, and it was just generally a lot of things. I think the only thing I would say before I go into your opinion of it, a thing that really annoyed me, the version I saw was the United States and USA Network version. Throughout this main event, I found that they were having adverts for Head and Shoulders, and I just felt this is your world title match. I know you're getting paid by Head and Shoulders, but it was so annoying. Did you sort of see anything similar before I get your thoughts?
I didn't notice that, actually. And I watch USA Network too, obviously. But I mean, I can only assume, because they did do one commercial break where they did a picture-in-picture, which AEW, do you watch the US feed of AEW too?
Yeah, I do. I know they keep it running, don't they? And they've got like the
Always.
adverts for that mobile and all the other have continued.
Oh, Cricket Wireless.
Cricket Wireless, and the guy talking about ketchup, changing the subject, but no.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. But with WWE, I mean, they do it with NXT a lot too, I guess, because they have to do it with AEW. But with Raw and SmackDown, it's very, very rare to get a picture-in-picture because of how much money the advertisers are paying them. So I only assume running the Head and Shoulders blip was probably the only way they could get a picture-in-picture segment for that main event. But to kind of talk more about this match, I think that Tom Phillips actually didn't oversell what was going on. You know, I'm not sure how considerable the number of people are, but there are some people out there who maybe kids whose parents don't like wrestling, who don't have access to the WWE network and can't watch pay-per-views and depend on Raw and SmackDown and NXT. That's the only wrestling they watch. They depend on cable television. So seeing this WWE title match, which did feel very much like a WrestleMania, or at least like a pay-per-view match on TV, was cool, especially for those fans. And they did. I mean, McIntyre's entrance, you know, that's the kind of entrances that people have for WrestleMania. And also a lot of matches, the title matches you have on cable TV, they have a weird finish. They don't have a finish, and like they would have been a count out with Orton taking the count out. And they have the part where Adam Pearce comes out and makes it clear it's no count, no disqualification. It's just like, holy shit, like we're going to get a clean finish. Well, as clean as a no DQ match can be. We're going to get a clean finish on this title match. And I thought the match was very, very good. It was pay-per-view level, especially for what those two guys can do. Randy Orton, going back to that segment where Adam Pearce came out, the unofficial Raw general manager. Randy Orton is such a wonderful worker. And I loved that part right before Pearce came out, to where you can see how well Randy Orton understands psychology. He has McIntyre down in the ring, and he's grabbing his title and he's leaving. But he looks back, and Randy Orton's body language in his face, he's like, well, he's down. Maybe I should go back. Maybe I can't. But wait, no. Even though he's down, it might be a trap, or he's come back before. I'm gonna leave. I thought that kind of stuff was wonderful. And I mentioned before we went on the air, I loved the story of McIntyre going for the Claymore. He missed it 3 different times in the match, and it's like, well, if he can hit it, he's gonna win. But can he?
Yeah, definitely. I think this was a really good match. I think the time they had it was excellent. There was a lot of kind of near falls. It was exciting. But what it comes down to ultimately is Drew McIntyre is our new world champion now. And what I think surprised me, a couple of points about the match that surprised me. The fact we got a clean finish, that was a shock to me. We didn't get any interference, which I was amazed at. I thought we'd get a Sheamus or the Fiend maybe coming in. And the last thing I'd kind of say is the show kind of just went off the air with this. So we didn't have a sort of a Roman Reigns or anything sort of attacking Drew, which is what I'd kind of like to see. What were your thoughts of the finish? And now we've got a new world champion in Drew McIntyre again.
So a lot of people I've seen online are talking about, well, what was the point of taking the title off Drew just to put it right back on him?
That next to you, yeah, definitely.
And I think we did talk about this, or we this messaged about it, where I said I think WWE might have just wanted to have McIntyre back in the role as the guy who's the pursuer, who's the chaser. So you see him, like, I guess the title means more now that he won it back. It means even more now to lose it and get it back than it did when he first won it from Brock Lesnar. I also think, I told you going up, my number one, what I wanted as a fan was to have McIntyre versus Reigns. My number 2 was to do Orton versus Reigns with a bunch of interference from McIntyre and The Miz and Jey Uso. Yeah. And I didn't, that's what I thought they were going to do. I thought the Smackdown segment and the whole Smackdown angle was a swerve. I thought they were bringing McIntyre as this cameo on SmackDown to make the fans think they were going to have McIntyre versus Reigns and then have Orton win on Monday because they wanted to trick the fans. That's a classic swerve. But no, they went with my number 1 option, and we are getting a babyface versus heel world title versus world title match at Survivor Series.
I'm just not a fan of the world title only being on somebody for 22 days. It doesn't seem very long for me. But more importantly, obviously, we are going to get this dream match, supposedly. I think a couple of key things for me. I think the fact that we are going to have this dream match with only 6 days build, not a massive fan of that. I would love to see them have time. I've had the whole of the month to build this feud up between Roman and Drew, but it hasn't happened. Another small kind of criticism I got is throughout this show, there was no real sort of appearance by SmackDown. We had nobody from the other brand. So we're going into this pay-per-view now, and all we've had is Drew come across on one show to basically start this almost feud between sort of Roman and Drew, and also SmackDown versus Raw. Do you think they've really missed a trick here? Clearly on SmackDown, they was able to get Drew over on this show. Does this not show that they should have been doing this throughout this whole sort of month building up to this pay-per-view?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they're just not thinking about it or if they are just so concerned about the COVID idea of having people who normally aren't in the same building together being together. There could be some of that. But yeah, they did bring McIntyre over. So, what would be the harm in bringing Randy Orton, one other guy from Raw, over? Because what I wanted last Friday, I thought it would have been good after McIntyre beats Jey Uso. You have Orton pop up and RKO either McIntyre or have him RKO Roman Reigns, and Orton's like, yeah, don't even worry about McIntyre. Like, you got me at Survivor Series. And there wasn't any of that. Yeah, or have a Roman Reigns just spear McIntyre after the match last night.
I really hope that they this week on SmackDown on Friday then have they've got to have Drew and Roman. Now they know what the match is. That's if they're only going to bring one person over again. They done it last week. Let's bring Drew over and Roman again. I think that's kind of something to do. But no, definitely. What was your if you want to give this show a rating, kind of out of 10 this week? What would you rate it?
So just to recap again, 2 weeks ago I gave it a 3 out of 10. Last week I was 7 or 8. I went with an 8 out of 10. I think this week I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. There were a lot of segments, a lot of backstage segments, not as many matches. The matches they did have were quite good for the most part. The main event was good. The build-up for the main event was good. We got a great tag title match. We got a great, I mean, it wasn't necessarily the best wrestling match, but I thought the match where Retribution won was good. And some of the segments were good. Yeah, 6 out of 10 is what I would go. It was above average, just slightly above average of a 5 out of 10.
I think 2 matches saved the show for me. I think that the world heavyweight title match, the main event, was excellent, and also the world tag team titles. Them 2 matches saved the show. There's a lot of segments, unfortunately, that don't seem to be doing much or repetitive, that are not going anywhere. So I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I'm really intrigued to see what happens when we come off Survivor Series to what's going to happen next. My early prediction before we go into Survivor Series, I think we're going to probably be getting this Drew McIntyre Sheamus feud. I think that looks to me to be nailed on for TLC. Really, have you got any predictions on who Drew's going to face next?
So to talk a little bit about that, we kind of have to talk about Survivor Series too. So it kind of depends on what happens with the match with Roman Reigns. Because, I mean, we have mentioned how to some degree the Survivor Series matches don't mean anything long term. But Drew McIntyre or Roman Reigns, are we going to see one of those guys lose this Sunday? And if we do actually witness that, what does that mean for them moving forward? Because they lost a very, very big match, regardless of whether it has any storyline implications. And so, yeah, I mean, McIntyre, it does seem like they're setting up a feud with Sheamus. I think the feud could be very good. I'm not sure what this sword deal is. If I were any creative, I'd say stay away from that stuff, but hell. We're having a ceremony this Sunday for a zombie who's been wrestling for 30 years. So, I mean, okay, all right.
No problem. Let's get into this then. So let's get into the Survivor Series card and our predictions and stuff. So obviously Sunday we've got Survivor Series. So we've only got 6 matches so far, plus the farewell to the Undertaker as well. So let's go into the matches then. So the first match we'll cover Bobby Lashley versus Sami Zayn. So the Raw United States Champion versus the Intercontinental Champion. Obviously, this is a non-title match. Neither wrestler has really they've not faced each other face to face. It's all been done via Bobby Lashley basically talking about how he's going to destroy Sami Zayn. So when I look at this match and what I think is going to happen, let's look at Bobby Lashley then. Bobby Lashley, obviously, he's beat Titus O'Neil recently. He's beat R-Truth, the 24/7 champion. He's beat Slapjack as well back in Hell in a Cell. And he's not lost a match basically since April, where he lost to Drew McIntyre back at Backlash. So he's obviously he's on one of the biggest winning runs in WWE at the moment. He's in a fantastic run. We then look at his opponent, Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn, obviously, so far has only lost 1 singles match this year. He lost to AJ Styles, and that was back in September. He's obviously had this Intercontinental title on and off since where he won it back at March in Elimination Chamber. And his recent wins, he's obviously beat Apollo Crews recently. He's also beat Jeff Hardy. But for me, this is only going one way. I think Bobby Lashley has the win. I don't see WWE chucking in this Bobby Lashley win streak for Sami Zayn, really. Although I think Sami Zayn's a better wrestler probably in ring. I think this will be a great match, but I think this is going to be a squash match. What's your predictions and thoughts?
I think that a squash match is the way to do it. And I mean, even though it's not turning Bobby Lashley babyface, fans want to see Sami Zayn as a heel get the hell beat out of him. And it's the way to do it. Because we've mentioned before, Bobby Lashley appears to be in the grooming stages for a big main event push in the future. And they're booking him extremely strong. I think the only 3 guys who are booked stronger than Lashley on Raw, you could say McIntyre, Orton, and The Fiend. But nobody else gets that. I mean, Braun Strowman, okay, so 5.
I'd argue Strowman.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's been a joke since he won the belt back at WrestleMania, and he got kind of destroyed by Roman straight away, didn't he? Practically, he dropped the belt practically straight away. But you're entitled to your opinion. I definitely agree with the other 3.
No, you're right. But I agree with you too. So Lashley, in terms of protection, is in the top 4 on Raw, and that's the way to do it.
Perfect. We're then going to go into this women's title match, or not women's title match. It's the Raw Women's Champion, Asuka, facing Sasha Banks, the SmackDown Women's title. And this is obviously champion versus champion non-title match. Obviously, this is another one where we've not really had much dialect. Obviously, this week on Raw, Asuka did mention Sasha Banks. When we look at this, let's break this down then. So Asuka obviously has not lost a singles match since SummerSlam. Obviously, that's where she lost to Bayley. Her recent wins, she's obviously beaten Nia Jax by disqualification. She's destroyed Lana by submission. She's beaten the former Zelina Vega, and she's also kind of beaten Bayley. And obviously, they've faced each other apparently 4 times this year. So Asuka's won 2 of them. Sasha won 1, and there's been 1 draw. When they last had a match back at SummerSlam, Asuka got the victory as well. When we look at Sasha Banks also has also sort of been on a reasonable run. She beat Bayley recently by submission. That was back at the start of November. She obviously beat Bayley at Hell in a Cell to win the title. And she's also beat her kind of back in October by disqualification as well. And she's obviously, her last loss was to Asuka. So for me, I think this is a dream match. We have seen it, as I said, 4 times already this year. I think in ring it'll be good. These are probably 2 of the best women they could put out there. But for me, I think there's only one person winning this. I just don't see them throwing in the sort of the Asuka win streak as such. I think Asuka's your winner here. I think it'll be a close match, but it's really hard to call. What's your prediction? Your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, people have talked about how we've seen this match before, but I don't remember the last time we've seen it to where both are baby faces. And so that will change the atmosphere a lot. It makes it a lot more dream matchish. And I do think that Asuka will probably win, but this is a hell of an opportunity for Sasha Banks as a performer, because you remember Sasha Banks in NXT, she had the NXT TakeOver Brooklyn match with Bayley. Like, Sasha Banks was known as your clutch player. I mean, she would put on, when the pressure was the most, that's when people like Sasha Banks turned into a diamond. And I remember there were a couple of years ago, Ronda Rousey was in, and Sasha, I forgot what exactly they were doing with it, but Sasha had kind of lost her NXT mojo. She wasn't really, and then she had this one-on-one match with Ronda Rousey, and you saw the NXT Sasha Banks come back, and she had that passion, and she had everything. I'm hoping this match, kind of not having a title involved, being more of an exhibition, I think that the person who could really shine in it is Sasha.
I think in ring it'll be really, really good. It's a really hard match to pick a winner, because I think if you're going to basically pick somebody based on kind of who needs the win more, Sasha does need to get the win. She's obviously been seen as an underdog recently. Obviously, they've just really started her with this run with the belt, so she needs it more. This is probably the one place she could afford Asuka to lose. But I think I'd be a fan of it. It probably goes down like a lead balloon, but I would do it if they're really clever. I would have Reckoning come in and just basically make it a no contest. I know you shouldn't be doing no contest, but if you really don't want to pick a winner, that for me, you're going to be putting Reckoning up there against somebody eventually of that level. So I think this is a place to do it. Would you be a fan of that, or do you think we have to have a winner here?
No, I would be a fan of that. Yeah. I mean, you could also have Reckoning, even though she doesn't care about Sasha Banks. Reckoning's on Raw, so her main target is Asuka. Have Reckoning kind of cost Asuka the match, because that, going back to what you were saying about this mystique of Asuka that's kind of been off and on, but Asuka still has a pretty good win-loss record. Yeah. If you're going to have Asuka lose, have it be a tainted victory, but it doesn't discredit Sasha Banks at all, because you could have it where Sasha's even knocked out or whatever and doesn't even know what happens.
Definitely. Do you think this kind of hurts it, the whole thing that they're both babyface? Do you think that makes it a kind of a harder match to kind of watch, if that makes sense? I prefer the heel-face dynamic. I'm kind of old school. I really like it when we've got a good person and a bad person, so to speak. What do you think? Or do you think it makes it more intriguing?
I think it makes it more intriguing because, I mean, yeah, you're right that a lot of times when you do babyface versus babyface, and especially heel versus heel, the matches can kind of go flat. But some of the most legendary matches in wrestling history were babyface versus babyface. Macho Man, Macho Man was a heel, but like, Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, when people wanted to see them face, were both babyfaces. Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, that's the big matches that you want to see. And so, and plus, since we've seen it before, where, Asuka was the babyface and Sasha was the heel, or, I mean, we've probably seen it to where Asuka was more of the heel and Sasha was the babyface. Having them both established on their shows as babyfaces fighting does change the atmosphere, and it makes it feel a lot fresher to me.
Definitely. Have you got anything else to add on that match before I move forward?
No.
No, okay.
I said what I said.
No problem. We then go into the next match then. So obviously it's Team Raw, Women's Team Raw, which is Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, the Raw Women's Champions, Lana, Lacey Evans and Peyton Royce facing Team SmackDown, Bianca Belair, Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan and 2 members to be decided. Looking at 2 members to be decided, I'll put this out there, as I said other weeks, Carmella and Bayley's my pick for the 2 people to be filled this week on SmackDown. If we do say that the match is there, for me, Team Raw on paper, what a weak team. The only people really I'd say that they've got of that level, I'd say Shayna Baszler really for me. I think Peyton Royce is up and coming to a certain point. Lacey Evans isn't bad in ring. I think for me, it's all on Shayna to a certain point. Looking at Team SmackDown, for me, it's all about the Bianca Belair show, so to speak. I think she's definitely destined for bigger things, and I think this could be an interesting match. If we're looking for a prediction, for me, I see it coming down to sort of a final 2. I can see it being... let's have a look and see what they're doing. It's really hard for me to see who's going to be in the final Team Raw. I would say we're going to probably get potentially It's going to have to be a baby face and a heel in the final two, isn't it? Would you say?
It could be. I mean, they
What's your
could go a
thoughts?
lot of ways. They could go a lot of ways with this match. I mean, we're talking about Lana getting this breakout moment where she
Yeah.
turns into this big baby face. You could have somehow it winds up being Lana by herself, and she, you know, she doesn't have to come back and win. She can have that Keith Lee style moment that we
Yeah.
saw last year, to where even though she does fall to Team SmackDown, she eliminates Bailey, or she eliminates the Riot Squad or whatever. We just see Lana perform on a level that we've never seen her before. You could do that. I think that they might utilize this match to just further sell the angle between I can't say it, Jax, Baszler, and Lana. They might just have that keep going with Bailey and Carmella if they are the two involved. They've obviously got their own angles they're kind of focused on. Carmella's focused on Sasha Banks. I will tell you, I wasn't expecting to see a reunited Riot Squad in this match. I mean, when Liv Morgan and Ruby Riot won both of their matches together, and that kind of threw me for a loop.
Definitely. I've got to say, regarding that Ruby Riot, obviously Chelsea Green unfortunately got injured, but for me, for them to bring Chelsea Green in on a debut, ignore the injury, the fact she didn't get a win, I was just like horrified. I thought it was really silly, but I think we're looking at this. I think my main frustration with this match before we go forward, I've got two kind of things that I think I would like to have seen at this point. I'd love to have seen Team SmackDown be established, and I'd love to have seen us know who the members are. I think we're going into sort of 2 nights for a pay-per-view, and you don't even know who the members are. It's not very good. It shows that there's no real thought. It's been thrown together, really, and you haven't really been able to build up that whole storyline dynamic. Whereas on Raw, everybody's been bickering all the time. I know you've dropped 2 members this week on Raw. You've now changed it. But on SmackDown now, all we've got is the 3 supposed baby faces. So we're going to obviously get 2 heels. But for me, it's really hard to pick. I just don't know who's going to win this match. But if I'm going to put it on the line, I would say I think Bianca Belair's going to do a Keith Lee. I think she's going to take out a lot of Raw. And I think if we're looking at team to win it, it depends. If Bayley's on Team SmackDown, I still think they're really heavily involved with Bayley. Bayley's still probably one of the best women in WWE, in my opinion, on the roster. So if Bayley's on Team SmackDown, I'm actually going to go for Team SmackDown to win this. Any predictions or anything further?
Well, I agree with what you were just saying, that it is kind of bad that they now have, SmackDown, they got 2 hours to sell us on a complete Team SmackDown for the women's match. Somehow in the span of 2 hours, they're going to have 2 more women join that team. And it will be interesting to see who it is. I think your 2 choices are quite good.
Thank you.
Who it is and how it plays out.
Carmella maybe is a long shot, but I think Bayley definitely. The reason why I'd say Bayley is she's got nothing else on the card, and she's one of the main people on SmackDown, so it would fit. And I think they need to sort of have a dynamic, because if you look at the wrestlers they've got on the SmackDown side, they've got nobody to equal Shayna, in my view. I think
Exactly
is great, but she's not at the level of Shayna Baszler yet.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly the problem.
Are you going to predict a winner then? Who do you predict?
Yeah, Team Raw is so volatile. I don't see them being able to work together. Maybe SmackDown. Well, if it's 3 baby faces and 2 heels, there's going to be some bickering, as we call it, too. But they seem to be a little stronger, and maybe just the strength overcomes that opportunity that Raw is leaving them wide open, basically.
We see Lana going for a table for the 10th week.
Absolutely.
I think so. 100%.
Absolutely.
By her own team, probably, as well.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, so let's go into our next kind of match. We've obviously got the tag team champions of Raw, and that's the New Day facing the tag team champions on SmackDown, the Street Profits, in a dream match. For me, I think this is going to be fantastic. Clearly, obviously, the great work we've seen this past week on Raw, the Hurt Business, I think the Street Profits are even better than the Hurt Business. So I think this is going to be one of the tag team matches of the year. I think the only match maybe that might have been better would have been the FTR versus Young Bucks match of this past AEW pay-per-view. But in terms of this match, really hard to predict. I think for me, I'm a fan of the Street Profits, really. I think they've had this belt for a long time. Or I know they honestly, or not the belt for a long time, but they've been tag champions for a long time, if that makes sense. So I think they want to continue that run, and I'm predicting the Street Profits. Any prediction on this?
As far as who's going to win, I don't even know if I can put a prediction on it. Both teams could understandably get the win, but yeah, I'm glad to see that. I think this will be WWE's answer to FTR versus the Young Bucks. And I've mentioned in the past how the intrigue of this match is that they're both baby faces. They've been on separate shows since both of them have come in. And there's some similarities, but there's also some very clear differences. You've got some good athletes on both teams. It is in all ways a true dream match. And like I've said before, the reason I wanted to see this is because from here on out, it'll be a while before we get to see it again. They've been on separate brands before. They're on separate brands now, the opposite, And so, yeah, it's once this is your opportunity to do this match that you're not going to see again for a long time.
I think it's definitely sort of a very sort of exciting match, really. I think it's got potential. In ring, it's got potential to be match of the night, potentially. But I think it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how it plays out. I think it's hard to predict a winner, but I think this is going to be a good one either way. But definitely, we then go into sort of the men's Survivor Series style match. So we've got Team Raw, AJ Styles as captain, Keith Lee, Sheamus, Braun Strowman and Riddle, facing Team SmackDown, which is Kevin Owens, Jey Uso, King Corbin, Seth Rollins, and a member to be decided. Once again, a similar problem to the women's one. We are going into this match without a full team again, which is a shame, really. I think that it seems to be pity, really. But if we're looking at kind of the fifth member, for me, it's going to be a babyface. We've obviously got 3 heels on Team SmackDown, so that limits it down to 1 of 3 people for me. I think you're looking at potentially either Daniel Bryan or Rey Mysterio, Dominic Mysterio. I think that'll be the person in this match. If we're looking at how this match is going to go, you've got a couple of interesting elements. You've obviously got Jey Uso. He's been on a fantastic run. Besides his recent loss to Drew McIntyre on SmackDown, they're clearly behind the Jey Uso characters, so I could see him doing big things here. You've obviously got Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins, I think, will be one of the first people maybe to be eliminated. He's destined to kind of leave WWE quite soon with a whole thing with Becky Lynch going on. And I think we're looking at Team Raw. Team Raw has got some standouts. I'll be interested to see what they do with Keith Lee, whether they show the effects of last year where he basically destroyed WWE on his own practically, and some other things. Have you got any prediction for the 5th member, and who do you think is winning this match?
The only other person who I don't think he would be quite as good would be Chad Gable that I could see thrown in. But yeah, one of those 3 makes sense to me. I mean, obviously, Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins being on the same team, like they might be worse off than Team Raw. This whole development has been interesting because Raw and SmackDown have different creative teams. So it is interesting seeing how with the men's and women's matches, Raw's writing team was like, let's get these teams together, then create an angle with it. Whereas SmackDown's teams seem to be focused on other parts of the show. So they've kind of scrambled with developing the 5-on-5 match.
Definitely. I think what's interesting here is just the whole dynamic of sort of baby faces and heel. You look at Team SmackDown, it is basically heels. It's besides Kevin Owens, it's all heels,
yes.
Which is interesting. When you look at Team Raw's a bit similar, but you have kind of got Riddle. Riddle's a baby face. Strowman, I'd say, is a tweener. He's kind of in the middle, really. Sheamus is another one that's a tweener now, based on his recent one with Drew. And you've got Keith Lee, a baby face, and you've got AJ, I guess, which is a heel. For me, if I'm looking at a final 2, it's so hard to predict the final 2, but I think you're going to have to go with on Team Raw. I would say you're going to probably go with Sheamus. Sheamus, if the rumors are true and he's going to be facing Drew, they're going to give him a big sort of cameo in this match for me. So I think Sheamus will be in the final 2, and I could see Sheamus and the other person being in the final 2, somebody like a Kevin Owens or Jey Uso, really. But for me, I think the winners here, I'm going to put it out there, I think your winners on this one will be Team SmackDown. I can see Team SmackDown getting a win here. I think Team Raw, they just don't get on. And I think SmackDown probably need the win more than Team Raw. I think Team Raw, they're very established. There's a lot of credible wrestlers. Them losing this match doesn't really do too much damage. Because I think on Team SmackDown, if somebody like a Jey Uso or a Kevin Owens got the pinfall here, it could be a massive thing to build them, propel them even further forward up the card. What's your thoughts?
Because I like the way they're developing them right now. I feel like the payoff to everything we've seen on Raw is that for one night, they might actually be able to finally get it together under this thing with AJ Styles. I actually, with the lineup right now, see Team Raw being, because especially if they do Rey Mysterio as the 5th guy or Dominic,
I can see that.
Seth Rollins is going to fall. You've got Kevin Owens and Jey Uso who's going to fall apart. I could see Team SmackDown having more issues than Raw. Like with Raw, it's these little jabs and stuff, but SmackDown, you've got these guys who hate each other on the same team. I'm leaning toward Raw, actually, depending on who that 5th guy is, especially for SmackDown.
Definitely. I think the thing with this, I think the reason why I would say Team SmackDown, looking logically, I can't see Team Raw winning both the men's and the women's one. So I think they'll potentially could win the the women's one, and then obviously then lose the men's. But never know. I think it's interesting. I think the fact that we don't know who the fifth member is. Do you not think it would have been clever from WWE to kind of tease a mystery person at this point? At least then it could have covered up for kind of the inadequacies of not knowing who it is to now. I think that could have done some good work with that. Really.
Are you saying like say it's a fifth person, and you're not going to see them come out until Survivor Series?
Yeah, I think as long as you deliver it somebody decent, maybe
it would add some intrigue to it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would be open to that.
I think it's something they could do, definitely. But no, I think the main thing that I found with the Survivor Series matches, I think I get it, we're in COVID and all this lot, but it's such a struggle not seeing the wrestlers feuding with each other like brand to brand, because it would have been a great opportunity for SmackDown to jump Raw when the wrestlers not getting on after the Retribution stuff. And I really think if another kind of tangent as well, if Retribution had been built up to that credible level, they really could have been the third team in this match. I think if they'd have been built credible since the start. What's your kind of thoughts on that before we go into the main event?
That would be kind of cool. I mean, like sort of what we saw with the NWO in the early days, where the NWO was like outside of WCW, they were their own entity outside the company. If you'd built Retribution up differently, it's like they're not even part of the WWE. They're fighting Raw and SmackDown. Unfortunately, that has long gone out the window since then, because now they're just certified Raw superstars. You know?
Yeah, no, of course. I thought it would have been cool, though, because you'd have had a great storyline to tell. You could have said that we weren't even included in Survivor Series. You want to leave us off, we'll still turn up. You could have had them come and it would have been a great sort of spectacle to see. I would have loved to have seen that if it would have been that level now, we didn't know who's in it, and they were built the way they were when they were tearing up arenas and that lot. It could have been a fun spectacle, but that's another tangent anyway, definitely.
Yeah, but no, you're right. It would be a good idea if you could have developed it differently. Yeah.
Perfect.
From like the summer. Yeah.
We're then going into the main event. So this is obviously our main event, which is the WWE Undisputed Champion, Roman Reigns, facing Drew McIntyre, the World Champion. So let's look at this and break this down then. So obviously we look at Drew. Drew has obviously been on a pretty good tear this year. He's only ever lost in like one singles match, really, and that was obviously to Randy Orton back in Hell in a Cell. He's been on an unbelievable run. When we look at kind of his recent wins, Drew recently he beat Randy Orton this past week on Raw. He's beat Jey Uso, went to SmackDown and took it to Jey Uso. He's also won that 6-man tag against John Morrison, Randy Orton, The Miz, and he's also defeated The Miz recently. When we look at kind of his opponent, Roman Reigns obviously beat Jey Uso at the Hell in a Cell, destroyed Braun Strowman back on SmackDown, destroyed Uso again. He's also sort of won he won that triple threat match back at Payback in August to win the belt. And it's kind of one of the things. Roman Reigns is another one. He hasn't lost a match this year. His last loss, trivia question, Josh, who do you reckon Roman Reigns' last loss was against?
Baron Corbin?
Yeah, correct. Baron Corbin back at TLC last year was his last loss, unbelievably. And a couple of interesting points about this match. Obviously, this is like the third meeting of this match. They faced each other at WrestleMania last year and also at Stomping Ground last year, where Roman Reigns was able to get the win for both times. It's just amazing how much both wrestlers have come on in 12 months. And
you're right.
How new this match feels to me. It feels fresh. It's almost like a dream match. This is definitely WrestleMania worthy. It's the win streak versus win streak. It's really, really kind of hard to predict. I only see one winner, and I'm going to call that winner now. For me, the winner here is Roman Reigns. WWE have done some fantastic work this year, bringing Roman Reigns up as a heel. Drew has had that one loss to Randy Orton, and he is the one that's kind of has had a loss now. So I just don't see them dropping the Roman Reigns loss here. Roman Reigns is your winner. What's your prediction and thoughts of the feud in the match?
Yeah, you and I are on the same wavelength. I think there's no way we're going to see Roman Reigns lose. I mean, when we do see Roman lose, it will be with much bigger stakes than just a brand supremacy match. And honestly, out of all the inter-brand matches, this is the one that I can visualize the most clearly. I think what we're probably going to see is Jey Uso gets involved. Sheamus is going to come out, take out Jey Uso. I'm here to help you, Drew. You know, that sort of thing. It's terrible Irish accent, I know. Yeah, and then Brogue kicks McIntyre, and Roman gets the win. That's what I'm thinking.
Do we see the Miz cash in as well potentially here?
That could be. I didn't even think about that. We could, and the Miz actually isn't on the show, is he?
No,
he's not in any matches. Ooh, that could be. Yeah, or at least tease it. Maybe he doesn't cash in, but like. He teases it, or Sheamus runs him off, or whatever. Because the thing, I guess they could have the Miz surprisingly take the title, and this feud with McIntyre and Sheamus doesn't actually have the WWE title involved. I don't know.
It's an interesting dynamic. I think the only thing I would like to see them build this up with more than the 6 days they've had. It's hard to predict the winner, but it's definitely I see Roman Reigns. I think there's a lot of room here for shenanigans. Another thing I'd say about this, my last kind of thing about the card, I'd say is it's a shame really the amount of wrestlers that aren't on this card. We're obviously there's no Alexa Bliss, there's no The Fiend, there's no Randy Orton. There's quite a few wrestlers there on the Raw side that I would thought would have a place on this card. Are you surprised they've not been included in some sort of form?
Yeah, because think about it. The WWE title angle we're seeing on Raw, only one of those guys is in a match now at Survivor Series. So The Miz, The Fiend, and Randy Orton, as you just said, are not involved. Will we see most of, if not all of them? Probably. I think The Miz and The Fiend popping up is the most likely. Orton, I don't know if he's going to because Orton, when he gets beat, does kind of tuck his tail sometimes and run. And then he, because he's an opportunist too, so he's waiting for the next time to pop up. But yeah, I think we'll see at least some of those guys.
Brilliant. Have you got anything else to add before we go into the last part of Survivor Series?
No, I think we're ready to talk about the grand finale. Well, it won't end the show, but it's one of the biggest spectacles of Survivor Series. And actually, a guy who, since the beginning of his career, has been associated with Survivor Series.
Definitely. So let's get into it. So obviously this Sunday is going to be the final farewell to The Undertaker. Obviously many years, a career, obviously established many years, many fantastic memories, probably the greatest character in wrestling history, one of the best gimmicks probably of all time, and a very interesting way to go. Obviously he's going to go on Sunday with little or no fans, which is obviously a shame. A couple of key things for me and a couple of key highlights, really. I think I really became a fan of The Undertaker when I was about 7 years old, going back to kind of 1992, 1993. I remember just kind of being amazed by the gimmick. And so I remember seeing his match against Jake the Snake Roberts at WrestleMania where he kind of turned babyface and the whole mystique of him and stuff. I just think he's got such good longevity in the backstory of him and Kane and Undertaker. Probably arguably he was involved in probably the greatest feud of all time, in my opinion, in the Mankind versus Undertaker match. And I think it's kind of fantastic. What's your memories and thoughts of The Undertaker and any of your favourite matches, really?
God, man, this is so hard to condense, so I'm just going to tell it to you the way it's running through my head. We could talk for hours just about the kind of in-ring performer, the kind of character, and the kind of person that Mark Calloway is. But yeah, I'll tell you, so like you would message me about picking your favorite Undertaker moment. So I'll go ahead and tell you what that one is to kind of kick things off. So I was a WCW fan and religiously watched them and very rarely watched the WWF until the WCW went out of business. Then I turned over. So when I started watching the WWF regularly, Undertaker was deep into his American Badass character. And so all I'd ever seen from the Dead Man or that classic Undertaker is from archive footage or whatnot. I do remember when I was in elementary school watching WCW, there were kids who were flat out scared of the Undertaker, especially when he was in the ministry and stuff like that, when he was kind of satanic cult leader. Kids were terrified of him in real life. And so in 2004, when I was watching the WWE, and he got injured and he came back after he was buried alive. And that gong hit in Madison Square Garden at WrestleMania 20. And we saw him back as the Dead Man. That has to be, for me as a fan, my favorite moment. He comes back and he faces Kane. And just the reaction in that moment, in that match, for me as a fan, was incredible. And I think I taped WrestleMania and I watched that match like every single day the week after WrestleMania 20 because of how cool it was to me to finally see him back as the guy that he was.
Awesome, mate. It's good to hear. I think for me, my favourite memory of The Undertaker, I'm probably going to go back to 1996, really. Between 96 and 98, I was 1996, I was 11 years old. I never forget the feud of him and Mankind. It really sort of played on my sort of thoughts. I remember being so into it and generally feeling sort of I was almost like sick for a week when Paul Bearer turned and joined Mankind after the Boiler Room Brawl. Obviously at that point, didn't read the dirt sheets, didn't read anything, but I'd never seen a match that was so brutal at that time. I know it was ECW, stuff like that, but when you get this big story of Paul Bearer and The Undertaker, you get the whole piano music and stuff like that. For me, I've never felt that reaction since in wrestling, no matter what I've seen. Maybe I'm older now and stuff, but I was generally, the whole feud between Mankind and Undertaker really sort of affected my young mind at that point. I really was generally scared of what would happen to The Undertaker, which is great. I think the good thing about The Undertaker, that he always did a fantastic job of elevating new talent, whether that be Giant Gonzalez, Yokozuna. We could go on and on. This could be, this could be another podcast actually at some point. We'll suggest
that's something else I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, yeah. Okay, so yeah. In addition to his character, so one thing I was going to say about him is, yeah, he's kind of on the same page as Chris Jericho in terms of a guy who knows to maintain longevity. You can't stay the same gimmick. You have to keep reinventing yourself. He's been great at that. He's a great in-ring performer. I mean, honestly, I think sort of like Shawn Michaels, he had some of the best matches toward the end of his career. I mean, 2007 Undertaker, his matches then were probably as good as the matches he had in the 90s, you know? But what makes all of this that we've talked about even better is the kind of guy that Mark Calloway is in wrestling. And I've heard about this from Lance, because Lance was there, you know, and Undertaker was very, very high up in the backstage hierarchy. And the kind of man that Mark Calloway is, in terms of being this guy who understands the big picture. He's not concerned with his legacy and getting himself over. He cares about the business first and foremost. He cares about helping young talent. He cares about what's going to help the company, what's going to help me. And he has very much literally put his body on the line for that company and stuff like that. I mean, so helpful. Just such a nice guy. I mean, I'm going to bring him up because it's just relevant. Alberto, not condoning anything that's happened with Alberto, but like when Alberto was working for us in BLW, told us about how when Taker, you know, he was kind of semi-retired already. When he would come back on the road, he was just one of the boys. He didn't act like Brock Lesnar. He didn't act like a part-timer. He would ride with Rey Mysterio and Alberto and the Colognes and stuff and hang out with those guys, because Taker, and with the Bone Street crew, that's what he's always been. Taker is one of the boys, but he's at the same time a locker room leader and was always trying to help everybody. I'll tell you one story that I remember Lance told us. Like, this kind of shows you the kind of guy Taker is and how he doesn't just care about himself. Luther Reigns, you remember when he was?
Yeah, I remember him. Horseshoe.
Kurt Angle's, yeah. At one point, they were going to put Luther Reigns into a feud with Undertaker and actually give him a bit of a push. And Taker instantly wants to help this kid. He wants to help Luther Reigns. You know, you're in the business, we'll help you. So there was something about how Luther had done a lot of squash matches, so they didn't really know, you know, how he would do in a longer match with Taker. Undertaker had suggested, like, before the show, let's meet up at the arena and we'll go through some cardio and stuff like that, and we'll get you in shape. Taker shows up. I mean, like, come on, this is the Undertaker in like 2004. And, you know, totally giving back to the business. And Luther Reigns did not show up to the cardio. And Lance told us, if you notice, that week, Luther Reigns' career just kind of started going down. But that shows you the kind of person that Undertaker is.
Definitely. It's great to hear. We'll have to definitely do another podcast just on Undertaker at some point, maybe within the next couple of weeks, if you're up for it, Josh. We'll cover just a whole podcast on the Undertaker. We can talk about him for a while. Definitely, there's lots to do. Going back to kind of Survivor Series, I feel a bit of an injustice. We're not done Undertaker very much, but two things for Survivor Series this Sunday then. The two questions I've got for you is, do we see him going out now as retiring, or is this going to be a placeholder for a match at Mania potentially against The Fiend, which I think could still happen? If they're doing this heel turn, I can see him having one last match with a crowd. I just can't see him just going. I still think that's there at the back of his mind. I think if this is a place, what place to get a heel heat as well. Undertaker's final place, and yet you're going to attack him. He's going to have to go out. Maybe he goes out with somebody attacking him. I don't know.
It's very, very difficult. When I first heard about it, I thought, yeah, they're just teasing this retirement and they're never going to let this man leave. But it does seem like this might actually be it. And so I don't know. I mean, with The Fiend, it would be difficult because right now The Fiend wants the title. So how do you have that? I don't think so. I really want to believe this is it. Like, he's finally hanging the hat, the coat, the gloves. He's hanging it all up. He's hanging the urn up. He's hanging everything up. I think the only sort of interference we'll get is you might have someone come out and take a few moves from him, take the tombstone and stuff, so you see him in action. But I think that'll be the limit. That'll be the end of that. Yeah,
definitely. If his is the last sort of cameo in for the Undertaker, I just want to thank him. Obviously, it's been a great sort of ride. Really enjoyed his work. I think if they are going to go to one more match, for me, I don't really want to see it. I think it'll be a shame, really. I do want him to get that ovation he deserves from the crowd to a certain point, but if they're using this as a placeholder for another match, I think it really sort of would weaken it a bit. So for me, I'm hoping it's just going to be a final goodbye. And then he can go on and finally have his own life rather than having to give to the fans continually a little bit.
So adulation, what you were saying, I think he will get all of that at the Hall of Fame ceremony when he goes in. That's the thing. I mean, you know how the headline guy always gets his own entrance once they bring the other inductees out at WrestleMania. I'm assuming he's going to come out as full. He'll do the Hall of Fame ceremony as Mark Calloway, but when it's time to do that, he comes out in his full gear. And I mean, it'll be a good send off after his retirement at Survivor Series.
Definitely. I noticed we haven't got many matches on Survivor Series, so I'm really hoping they're going to give this some good time. I believe they must do based on the little amount of matches we've got so far.
Yeah, it's five matches, right? Yeah,
definitely.
So, absolutely,
I can see it being
looking forward to it.
Half-hour, 45 minutes, but no, definitely. Have you got anything else to add about Survivor Series with Undertaker before we wrap up tonight?
I'm looking forward to it because we just said there's not that many matches, and they've been doing a lot of their pay-per-views that way. Like I think in one of the meetings or in one of the conference calls, Vince said since they're doing these empty arena matches, these empty arena shows, they're not going to have the usual 4-hour pay-per-views. A lot of their pay-per-views have just been about 2.5 hours long. And it's very, very rare nowadays to see WWE having a less is more philosophy. And so, yeah, I mean, I like the 5 matches, and we have time for the Taker segment. Maybe not go much longer than 3 hours, and then keep it short and sweet, baby. Less is more. Quality over quantity. There's endless ways to say that, but I agree with it.
Definitely. I think you're spot on there. I think 3 hours will be quite a nice length, but no, definitely. We'll definitely be back kind of next week to review the results and obviously the aftermath on Raw. Definitely. Okay, so this has been Jonesy Chats Wrestling. I've been joined by Josh Hayes. Thank you all for watching. Please give us a like and a thumbs up. Please share the video if you like it. If you disagree or agree, leave some comments below. And more importantly, I hope you really all enjoy Survivor Series. Thank you for coming on, Josh.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, man.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.